Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to Skyrim Creation Kit modding. I am your host, Rozzlecopter. And we're continuing with our modding adventures in the Tomb of Hircine. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I enjoy it a lot. So, yeah, I like this area. Really cool, really cool. All right. So, we are modding the maze today. We kind of just modded, like we kind of just cluttered. Well, we've kind of finished cluttering this cave area and this entryway into the maze area. Still gonna have to like do this whole trapdoor thing. This script doesn't have a script. But yeah, we're gonna be doing that today. Today we're gonna be listening to more. Oops, not that. Accounts from a lonely broadcast station. Have about a half hour left of this one. Actually, wait, hold on. Let me see if there's any new individual stories. There is this one. Listen to this one. I'm gonna grab my water real quick. Actually, I'll be 1 second. Okay. Sorry about that.
I grew up in the kind of Rust Belt town where the cleanest, safest place for kids to play was the local sewer canal. My friends, Brett, Holly, Eli, and I met there almost every day during summer vacation. Overhanging trees, they gave us shade and hid us from the adults. It was like our own secret hangout spot. The only problem was the concrete tunnel at the end of it. Something about that tunnel made me think of a round, toothless stone mouth. Freakishly oversized insects that we'd never seen before buzzed in the humid breeze that blew out of that darkness. And it wasn't long before we started daring each other to crawl inside. Eli was the first to stick his head in, but he didn't dare go any further. Holly, though, did. She snorted, called us all scaredy cats, and crawled into the tunnel until only her tiny white shoe still hung outside of it. And then she screamed. The kind of 100-decibel shriek that only preteen girls are capable of. We grabbed her leg and yanked her out. She wouldn't stop scratching at her head. According to Holly, a spider as big as her hand had scurried through her hair. Yeah, we avoided the tunnel for a long time after that. Until the day that I lost Eli's basketball. I mean, it wasn't technically Eli's. It belonged to his older brother, Dwayne, a muscular 13-year-old, and we all lived in terror of him. I mean, in fact, the ball was Dwayne's most prized possession. Eli had only taken it to brag about the famous signature that covered it. But like the dumb kids we were, we couldn't resist throwing it around. I faked a pass to Brett, but tossed it to Eli instead. I didn't realize he was standing in front of the tunnel. Dwayne's prized ball slipped right through Eli's fingers and disappeared into the darkness. One look at Eli's terrified face was all I needed to imagine the beating that Dwayne would give us. No one was saying it, but I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, got down on my hands and knees, and crawled into the tunnel. The legs of a flying insect brushed against my ear, trying to climb inside. I cried out, smacked the side of my head, and nearly slipped in the slime beneath my legs. Something more than the bugs and muck was bothering me. And the tunnel was flat. How could the ball have rolled so far? Unless something had carried it. My friends were cheering me on, but their voices sounded very far away. I shuddered and kept moving. After what felt like forever, I saw lights up ahead. It streamed down through a grate overhead into a small concrete chamber. Dwayne's basketball rolled through it and into the gloom beyond. I had just stepped into the light when I heard it bounce. Looking for this? A voice asked from the shadows. Every instinct told me to scream and run, but I didn't. Who's there? I asked. Do you want your ball back? The voice teased. Or not? I couldn't tell if the speaker was male or female, old or young. The darkness hid them completely. Of course I do, I huffed. Then how about a trade? You get what you want, and I get something of yours. Like what? Bounce. Bounce. I'll tell you when the time is right. Not now. It was only a basketball, I told myself. I mean, how big of a trade could it be? Okay, fine. Give me the ball. Just like that, my trade came bouncing out of the shadows. It's been a pleasure. If you'd ever like to trade for anything else, you know where to find me. I gulped and backed away, my throat dry. I didn't want to turn my back to whatever was lurking in the shadows, but I didn't have a choice. I looked up and turned around. Two backlit child-sized figures were staring down into the grate. I scrambled out of the horrible tunnel as quickly as I could. You found it! Eli's cheer died in his throat when he saw my face. What's wrong? I opened my mouth, ready to tell him everything. Nothing, I found myself saying. Where's Brett and Holly? They climbed up on top of the grate to spy on you. Eli frowned. Are you sure you're okay? Never better. I forced myself to smile, wondering why I couldn't bring myself to talk about what I'd found. How about a trade? You get something of mine, and I get something of yours. Laying in bed that night, I turned those words over and over in my head as I listened to the windstorm outside. What kind of deal had I just made? When would the thing from the sewer be coming to collect? Branches scraped against the house like sharpened claws, and it was a long time before I was able to fall asleep. I woke to golden sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. I could hear my family arguing and laughing in the kitchen. The warm, buttery smell of Father's pancakes drifted up the stairs. Maybe things would be okay after all. Or so I thought. But something had changed between my friends and I. When we met back at the sewer the next day, Brett and Holly seemed tense, anxious even, like they were waiting for Eli and I to leave. We parted ways after barely an hour had just passed. The whole experience left me with a sick sense of foreboding, although I wasn't sure why. And the next day, when we met again, I understood. Brett was hunched over in concentration, driving a brand new remote-controlled truck. He was a toy that his family could never have afforded, yet here it was, zooming up and down the slopes of the canal. Holly watched, stuffing her fist into a bag of enormous Mars bars, the kind that were only available around Halloween. Her parents had put her on a strict diet. So I thought. So where did the candy bars come from? I looked nervously at the black tunnel ahead. Hey guys, I smiled nervously. Where'd you get that stuff? Nowhere, Brett and Holly responded in unison. Their flat tone reminded me of my own voice when I tried to describe the bargain I'd made. As it turned out, the remote-controlled truck and bag of candy were only the beginning. Each time Eli and I showed up to the sewer canal, Brett and Holly had more stuff. A Barbie mansion, the board game Candyland, even light-up sneakers. It was so unnerving that Eli and I just stopped going down to play by the sewer canal. We were afraid of what we might find. Soon enough, we weren't the only ones. There was something ominous about the way the phone rang that night. And the fear in my mother's eyes when she handed it to me. It's your friend Holly, my mother whispered. She sounds upset. I think her cat's missing. Have you seen it? I could barely hear my mother's whispers over Holly's sobs. Ariel's gone and she's never coming back, my friend was wailing. She named her cat after the Little Mermaid because she loved water. The name usually made me laugh, but not that night. I can help you look for her, I stammered. No, you can't, Holly moaned. I found her collar by the sewer. She's gone. Another wail. My mother took away the phone, and I was left full of doubts. I mean, what had Ariel been doing down there? The next day, Holly walked sheepishly over to the abandoned lot where Eli and I were kicking a soccer ball into a trash can. Can I play with you guys? What's wrong? Eli sneered. A lot of other toys? The can boomed as he scored a goal. I'm not going down there anymore, Holly muttered. First, it was just my stuff that went missing, like my swimsuit, my house keys, but now that Ariel's gone... Holly couldn't say it, but I knew what she meant. She was scared of what might disappear next. For a long time, however, it seemed like nothing did. Brett, Holly, Eli, and I, we grew up. I forgot about dark sewer canals and abandoned lots, and instead spent more and more time inside on my computer. Eli went from a scrawny, scared kid to the star of our high school soccer team. Holly grew into a clever, beautiful bookworm. Writing fantasy stories and fan fictions was her way of dealing with the terrible secret that we all shared. Brett, Brett never left that secret behind. Of the four of us, he was the only one who continued to visit the sewer canal on a regular basis. As a result, he seemed to get everything he wanted. But he lost his friends. By our freshman year, Brett was looking at Holly in a strange way. It had been years since we'd last spoken, but he finally built up the courage to cross the lunchroom and talk to her. Holly, he stammered. I know we haven't hung out in a while, but I really like you, and I thought that maybe... Brett trailed off. A hush fell over the table as we stared at the floor, our lunch trays, anywhere but our old friend. I don't think it would work out, Brett, Holly finally answered. I'm sorry. Brett turned crimson, clenched his fists, and stormed off. After school, I knew exactly where he was going. By the time I caught up with Brett, he had already reached the sewer canal. Brett, I know you think this will fix things, but you've got to listen to me. It won't. My old friend looked over his shoulder at me, shook his head, and crawled inside. I stepped forward to follow him, but the moment I looked into the tunnel, I was 9 years old again, swatting away freakish bugs, dragging my knees through the slime, listening to that horrible voice bounce. No, I couldn't force myself to go in there a second time. And by the time Brett crawled out, it would be too late. I stuffed my hands into my pockets and trudged home in the autumn twilight, feeling much older than I ever had before. I woke to a dark room and the echo of a ringing phone. I looked at the clock. 4:04 a.m. Full of foreboding. I sprinted to the kitchen and answered it before my family could wake up. Oh, God, Brett whispered. This wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't me. You gotta believe me. It wasn't me. The boom of a door flying open, a scream. The line went dead. I knew it had happened long before the trial. The news coverage, or the assembly the principal had held about the terrible tragedy in our midst. And when Brett claimed he hadn't been the one to slit Holly's throat and place her naked corpse in his bed that night, I was the only one who believed him. Years have passed since I chased Eli's basketball down that dark tunnel, but I still hear its bounce in my dreams. I try to tell myself that the voice in the sewers has already taken what it wanted from me, or that it might even have forgotten about me. But I know I'm wrong. How will I know when I've made my trade? When I try to stop my car and find my brake line missing? When I check my 2-year-old son's crib and I find it empty? Or will it be when I wake up in that lightless concrete tube, naked and helpless, with that horrible voice whispering in my ear? Now I've got something of yours. Something I've been wanting for a long time. For those of you guys that like to listen to stories, which I assume is all of you since, you're here, check out the Chilling app. I keep saying the Chilling app, and you can start your free trial, blah, 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 over the past couple of years, I think? 2 years? Well, here's some amazing news for all of you. Chilling is currently introducing Chilling 2.0, which brings in a bunch of new features and a fresh new look. Most importantly, Chilling is now free. That's correct, free. Not as in start free trial. I'm saying it's free. You can go to it now and it's free. So once again, like I said, start listening free today. There's links in the description down below if you guys can check that out. And if not, then hey, you're the one who's missing out. Once again, that's the Chilling app. A big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jacob Fensky, Stephanie Butler, Jordan Humble, Chance Burnett, Diana Krause, Brimstone Panda.
That wasn't bad. Like, obviously, that was pretty heavily inspired by Stephen King's It, but it wasn't bad.
Evelyn was being very precious with her coffee cup, doing her best not to spill it on her dress. As we waited for our orders, she glanced around, but specifically avoided looking at any one person for too long. In towns like these, everyone knew everyone else. Everyone knew who moved in, who left, who came back, and who got into trouble. She quickly brought her attention back to me, resting an elbow on the table with her hand cupping her chin. "What's the bride's name?" she asked. God damn it. I felt like an idiot then. I had mentioned to her my family, but never even thought to introduce them the other way around. "Oh, her name's Adriana. She's sweet. You'll like her." I hummed for a second, trying to think of who else she might meet. "You'll get to meet my parents, aunts, uncles. Grandma only speaks Spanish, but you'll meet her too." Evelyn nodded. "Don't try chatting with Grandma. Got it." "Oh, no, she'll still talk to you for an hour, whether you understand her or not." I actually made Evelyn laugh that time. A real laugh. We saw people come and go through the diner, tables filling and emptying and filling again. We talked the whole time about anything other than work or the woods. She asked where I went to college, where I grew up, where I worked. We bonded over shared stories of crummy retail job woes and our weirdest former roommates, then complained about how bad the nachos were, while simultaneously trying to get another to eat an entire hot pepper in one bite. It's almost 2:30. We were 15 photos into a mobile album of my family's dogs when we realized we weren't alone anymore. A group passed by, made of 4 older men all dressed eerily identically in denim and trucker hats. The last one passed us. His eyes peered from Evelyn's face to mine, with a frown hidden somewhere in a bushy gray beard. He stopped, took 2 steps back to stand next to our table, and spoke to us. "I know you too." His voice was dry, old croak. "Heard you over the radio." Evelyn's gaze darted from him to me as the most uncomfortable smile stretched across her face, more like a grimace than anything else. "Hey, thanks. Glad to hear someone actually listens."
"It won't do any good,"
he interrupted, shutting her down in an instant.
"Nothing will stop it. We've been trying for decades. You'll be trying forever. Trying as long as you last."
It's amazing how quickly everything seemed to dim, like the life had been sucked out of the room. The happy conversation meant nothing anymore. Evelyn was silent. I was silent. And the man took a moment to draw in a slow, deep breath. Then he tapped the front of his cap and nodded a farewell, saying only one thing.
"Good luck."
As unpleasant as that was, perhaps the distraction was a good thing. It was getting into mid-afternoon now, and we had a bit of a drive to get to the wedding, but Evelyn didn't mind the prospect of getting out of the village limits for a day. After getting in the car and passing by the last tiny corner store before the stretch of road began, the easy feeling was coming back. We rolled down the windows to feel the breeze in the mountains, keeping the radio off the whole day. It really was a wasteland. As soon as we left town and rounded the mountain range that separated our little piece of civilization from the rest of the world, there was nothing to see for miles. A rest stop with one gas pump flew by. Inside of a building, dark, and the door practically an even less pleasant sight. All the way there, I couldn't help but wonder if anyone spotted strange things on this side of the wood. The sooner all traces of that town disappeared, the better. Evelyn was talkative, but in a nervous sort of way, asking if I thought my family would like her, or if they'd try to get her to drink any champagne. "Don't worry," I assured her as we pulled up to the building, several familiar faces making their way in. "I'll make sure that you stick to orange juice tonight." It was oddly refreshing to sit through the ceremony, not only because it was nice to see my family and loved ones, but because it was a big reminder of how things still went on as normal with the rest of my world. My cousin and her new husband looked happy. Children attending were whispering and being quickly hushed by their parents. My grandmother was loudly crying in joy in the front row, which made Evelyn snort with laughter, even though I could see a trace of her own heartfelt smile. None of that reminded me of the woods or the radio tower. None of it scared me. The normal world was still there. Wasn't as far away as I thought it was. The reception was a whirlwind. My family was naturally loud, talkative, and energetic, but all that seemed to hit us like a brick wall when we arrived at the post-ceremony celebration. I watched Evelyn's face become blank and stunned, caught in the headlights the moment the door opened, and we were bombarded by at least 5 different people. Everyone wanted to know who she was, where I'd been, and as my coworker was getting her 3rd hug from a great aunt who assumed that she was my significant other, we made the decision that it was time to sit down before we were ambushed any further. "Your family's sweet," she said, once she had a second to sit and take a breath. I laughed, knowing what she meant by sweet. "Sorry, I know they're a bit much. I only told them good things about you." "Really?" She had that shit-eating grin again. "Did you tell them about my terrible crude language and all the highly infectious diseases I'm carrying?" "Oh, yeah. No, I warned them about the smell, too." She punched me in the shoulder. We had a good laugh before my mother decided to make an appearance at last, recognizing Evelyn by association. At first, it looked like my poor coworker was about to have an allergic reaction to the sheer amount of hugs that she had received, but eventually the socially exhausted smile was mingled with a real, genuine one. I left them to chat for a moment, came back with a drink for myself, and, just as I had promised, passed a cup of orange juice over to Evelyn. I'm not one to take back a promise. Before we left for the night, I learned a few things. I learned that I'm not the biggest fan of champagne, that even jokingly calling Evelyn La Llorona is a quick way to get smacked by my grandmother, and that neither of us have any rhythm for dancing. She graced me with one slow dance near the end of the night, stepping on my toes at least a dozen times. I didn't complain. We both left with a smile, and every sore toe and scuffed shoe was worth it. The drive back to town was a long one, but it started on the right foot. We laughed about a few particular family moments after a few drinks, joked about terrible dancing. It was one of those moments where I realized that Evelyn and I were actually friends.
Friends?
However, things felt different the moment we realized where we were headed. Driving down the winding stretch of dark, forested road, it wasn't until the mountain range came into view beside us that the full weight of our return began to eat away at the glow of a somewhat casual evening. "I don't want to go back yet," Evelyn said, faced away from me as she stared out the passenger seat window. "Not until morning, at least." If I had my way, we wouldn't have gone back at all. "You want to crash at my place? I mean, you can have the bed." She actually seemed to consider it for a moment, sitting stiff in her chair, looking out the windshield, at the rearview mirror, anywhere but at my face. After a moment of silence, she cocked her head to the side with a sudden idea just as I turned the car to enter town. "Let's go to my place," she said. I was perplexed, but too curious of what she had planned to say no. We passed the apartments, the residential district, the shops. I was driving slow, expecting her to tell me to stop or take any turns at any given road, but she didn't. She waited until we were driving by the old elementary school to point out my window at a small stone driveway near the park. "Here, let's pull in here." I did as she said, parking the car right in front of the playground where the children would play during school. It was empty, as to be expected.
Ah, heck.
And
Sorry,
behind
if
the swings
Twitch
and
chat,
slides
if
was
you've
an
been chatting on
upward
Twitch, for some reason it
hill.
bugged out again. And I didn't
Met
see
with
it,
the
so
thick,
I
dreary
apologize.
tree line. Evelyn gave me a look, eyebrows raised, nudging her head towards her door as she unbuckled herself. At the time, I didn't understand why we were there, but she was so confident that it was where we were supposed to be. She got out of the car, stretching her legs after the long drive, and I followed right behind her. "So," I started, hands in my pockets of my black dress pants. "This is My last residence. Evelyn stated it without hesitation, as if it was common knowledge. I went to school here as a kid for a few years before we moved. When Jenny and I moved back and I ended up losing a place to stay, I slept under the slide for a little while. This is it. This is my place. She passed underneath the monkey bars, lifting a hand to tap the metal above her head. I, on the other hand, had to duck to go underneath it, all the while trying to think of a response. The playground looked used and well-loved, years of rust covering the equipment and the colorful paint chipping. The swing set made the most chilling sound as the chains rattled in the light breeze. I looked at the slide, which was made of yellow plastic and faded in the middle of years of use. Underneath was simply wood chips, as well as a few stray pieces of trash from children and probably adults who'd been hanging around after school. It didn't look like the best place to sleep. I'm sorry. And how else could I have reacted? Shit, don't say you're sorry, she laughed as she grabbed his swing set chain, propping one boot-clad foot on the seat and instantly making herself taller as she slowly swayed back and forth. Just ask if the wood chips ever poked my ass. Make a joke about it. It doesn't have to be awkward anymore, Danny. All right. I decided it wouldn't be awkward anymore. I gave her an embarrassed smile, sitting down on the swing beside her, and wondering when she decided to start calling me Danny. Evelyn plopped her heels back down to the wood chips to properly take a seat on the swing, using one foot to slowly tip forward and back. We were both facing the woods, a feeling that brought me discomfort, and I could only imagine it did the same for her. Finn did tell you about the abductions, right? She asked, and I nodded. Said the kids were being lured into the woods outside the school. Do you think he meant right here? A chill went up my spine, and I chuckled, an awkward reluctance.
Hey, Local Fur, and what's up, Alex? How are you guys doing today?
Wait until we leave to put that image in my head. Evelyn made a spooky woo noise and wiggled her fingers at me. This was how she did things. This was how we both did things. If we were scared and uncomfortable, we had to laugh.
Chillin', right on.
We were swinging next to one another in silence for a few minutes, before eventually Evelyn began to slow, her foot nearly motionless on the ground and no longer propelling her forward movement. I noticed the way that she sat perfectly still, eyes stuck on the wood chips beneath her feet. Wedding was nice, she said, a touch of sorrow in her tone. Thanks a lot for inviting me. Oh, of course. Well, technically, my mom invited you, but yeah. I wouldn't have gone if you didn't say I could go with you. She was sitting still now.
God, this doesn't sound like
looking at me
Evelyn.
instead of at the ground. There was a sad, comfortless expression on her face, as if the fake smile she wore caused her physical pain. I didn't know what to say to make it better. You know, I hope I'd go to Jenny's wedding someday. Maybe be a bridesmaid, help her get ready. Go to some stupid party with all her other girlfriends that I would complain about for weeks. There was the joyless chuckle again. I feel bad for Elijah, though. I had stopped swinging, and I leaned my head against one chain. I feel bad for him, too, I said, even if he tried to break my nose. Here we were again, in a situation that wasn't funny, still chuckling about it. But to be honest, the moment I got out of my car and ended up getting punched in the face was rather...
Yeah, hell
hilarious
yeah,
in
Mr.
hindsight.
Creepypasta all day.
Evelyn kicked at the ground, pushing herself back to start
Jam
singing again.
session.
She leaned back to look up at the sky.
Are you
When I
guys
talked
in?
with her,
Are you guys in like a band or
I did
something?
the same. I found it surprisingly dizzying. The stars were bright on a clear evening, out here away from the lights of town and far from any big cities. You can usually see Mars this time of year, she said, pointing up. But the hunt for the red planet was cut abruptly short. We both heard the sound of footsteps through dry grass and leaves, small ones, moving quickly and clumsily. Evelyn straightened up while I stood with eyes squinted into the tree line, expecting to see some normal or abnormal creature crawling out from the brush. What we saw instead was a figure, small and quick, hidden in shadow and on its way towards the woods.
Oh, a jazz band.
Was a child.
I actually
a little boy
love
dressed in red
jazz.
pajamas. And we both watched him make those final steps into the forest towards something tall and obscured by
I
the
can't say I
trees.
know a lot of jazz
Evelyn was
artists,
going to fall off the swing, her
but
legs
like
swinging
old timey
pigeon-toed as she rushed to
jazz,
stand up.
like
This was exactly
Sinatra,
what we feared. Did you see him?
Nat King
She asked.
Cole. I
But she
enjoy
didn't need to. I was
the
already on
old
my
timey
feet,
jazz a
ready to
lot.
follow. Was he following something? Oh, God damn it, Dan.
I know
She wasn't
Davina
staring
and
at
the
me, but
Davina
rather,
and the
her
Vagabonds. I
exasperation
love
came from a place of
that group,
concern.
but they're not old
Neither of us
timey.
waited
They're
around to
just
discuss what we were going to do.
a great
but somehow
jazz
agreed
band.
in silence that the only option was to catch up with the boy before there was no chance of ever finding him again in one piece. I got up to the top of the hill before her, but stopped to grab her arm and pulled her the rest of the way. Though out of breath, she was the first to rush ahead and past the tree line that separated our safe, normal world from the one that was wild and unpredictable. In the darkness of misshapen blobs of shadow, where it was
Bebop, jazz,
difficult
and
to tell the
blues. That's
difference
cool.
between a brush and an animal,
I like that kind of
our eyes were in
music.
constant search of a flash of red, a bit of movement, or the glow of eyes. The forest echoed
Is this
our steps.
jam
I could no longer
session
tell
gonna
what
be
sounds were coming from us and what sounds
like
were coming
a
from him.
like an actual
But twice Evelyn stopped in her tracks and grabbed my elbow as we kept still.
like public
I felt my own
session,
heartbeat
like a
pulsing out of
public
control.
concert?
Distantly, I heard the sound of small, clumsy footsteps, sometimes running and sometimes walking.
Yeah,
Evelyn
that's
heard
fine.
it better than I did, holding up 2 fingers, 2 sets of feet. We didn't wait around before speeding through the upward tilt of the hill. Where the hell did he go? Evelyn grabbed the tree, panting for breath, and turned to look behind us. I could no longer see the entrance of the woods.
Just to get together.
There was
Gotcha.
no telling how far we'd gone. I couldn't have even told you the direction we were facing after making so many turns. When we found the boy, then we would worry about what to do next. He was so young, so small. I know neither of us could live with ourselves if we were the last ones to see him alive but refused to do anything. I don't see him anymore, I told her, legs stiff as we soldiered on at a slower pace. We had both kept our voices to a whisper. We were already lost in plain view. There was no point in staying hidden anymore. Hey, little boy! We're here to help you! Where are you? A small group of bats tittered and squeaked above us as they
Freaking
abandoned
heck.
the tree behind us, while in the bushes, the rustling of rodents moved further away. It left the forest in an eerie silence for a few seconds before Evelyn perked up and pointed a finger past me. I heard crying, she said, in that direction. The constant dull ringing in my ears drowned out the noise almost completely, but when I paid close attention I could make out small suggestions of a high-pitched, uneven sound. It was the sobs and hiccups of a child, moving further away from us until I could no longer pick it up. But Evelyn could. She seemed to realize this as she took the lead and guided us both through a section of close, growing pines that scratched at my neck as we pushed their branches aside. We were running full speed when we noticed a flash of red above us. It was on the ground, crumpled in a heap. My heart sank, hoping and praying that the only red stains in my vision were the color of his pajamas. As we grew closer, we noticed him moving, rocking back and forth. He was sitting on the ground, hunched over and pounding little fists into the dirt. Hey, don't move. It's okay. Evelyn dropped down to the boy's level. He looked alarmed to see us at first, his tears streaked, red face ready to burst into a terrified wail until he realized that he was looking at 2 very ordinary humans. He didn't say anything, but it made my stomach sick with dread to see him crawling towards my coworker and I, as if looking for someone to comfort him. He had to be no older than 3. Shit, this kid was hardly big enough to upgrade from
Okay.
a crib. This tiny thing could have been dead. And inside of that is something I don't
There
think
we go.
I've ever recovered from. Let's get walking. We'll either find our way back or we'll see the radio tower, one or the other. I offered my hand at Evelyn's elbow, while she preoccupied herself with picking up the boy, who seemed more than willing to cling to her rather than walking on his own. Shit. He's shaking like a leaf, she told me. I almost commented that maybe she shouldn't cuss around a little 3-year-old, but wasn't the time or place for that. Lynn, you been keeping track of how many turns we made? She grumbled at my question. No, I haven't, and I can't see a damn thing. She was silenced, jumping with a start as the tree branches behind us crackled and snapped as if something moved very quickly through them. For only a second, I saw a dark shape taller than myself, but it appeared and disappeared through the dense shadow in an instant. She backed towards me, holding the little boy tighter as he whined and hid his face in my shoulder. Walk faster. Walk faster! She was taking quick steps, trying not to jostle a child in her arms while keeping her head turning in every
Okay.
direction. The look of panic on
I
her
feel
face
like that
was
area
one
is
that I
lit
had only
pretty well.
seen once before. It was the same face she wore the night the power went out. But this time we were in enemy territory without a generator. They were already here and looking for us, fog or no fog. No! We heard a shrill voice. It was the boy in the red pajamas pointing behind us. No! No! We stopped. One last crunch from both our feet, bringing silence around us, and then another crunch. And another, moving astonishingly slow. I hated to turn, but we had no choice. My mouth was dry, my heart was racing as I glanced over my shoulder. Seeing a figure standing perfectly still a few yards away with a blank, wooden stare pointed in our direction. His face was gone. Or rather, it was covered. His face was encased in tree roots, and his clothes were torn to reveal a skeletal cavity with vines and bark twisting into his hollowed-out body. He creaked when he moved like a bristle tree being blown in the wind, swaying on the spot. I had a fleeting thought that perhaps, if we stayed quiet and still, the blind creature wouldn't know we were here. But then I blinked, and he was closer. The sound of twigs snapping followed as if he took long, huge strides towards us on legs that creaked like wooden planks every time he bent his
Ooh,
knees.
eerie.
He made no sound and no voice, as if the human inside of the mask had been eaten away entirely. The boy screamed and Evelyn and I began to run. Her speed impaired by the weight of her arms, she was screaming at me, yelling many words I couldn't make out, but a few that I could. Most of them were exclaimed swear words, but I distinctly heard one sentence: "Don't look back." I didn't, but my mistake was when I chose to watch her instead of watching where I was going. My feet hit the edge of a thorn bush, and I was more startled by the impact than actually injured. It was enough to falter my steps, and in that moment my upper body was moving forward faster than my legs were. I began to stumble, stuck in place, and the final impact that I felt before hitting the ground would be the last clear thing I fully remember. There was a blur of activity. Before my head hit the forest floor, a sharp pain sent a surge through my back. A heavy weight pressed in the center of my body, spine arcing as I tried to rise onto my knees, only to be pushed back down by the back of my head. I remember the smell of leather and mud, the feel of hard rubber kicking the side of my head, twigs wrapping around my shoulders, but they weren't twigs at all. They were wooden hands, flipping my body over until I saw the sky and the silhouette of the tree-faced man disappearing into the trees above, cracking his boots down into the middle of my chest. My sight was becoming nothing but a blur. Seconds stolen away as everything above me moved faster than I did in real life. I heard the little boy crying. I heard Evelyn yelling at the top of her lungs. One moment I was looking at the stars, the next I was looking at her face as she pulled me by my sleeve, trying to drag me through the dirt, with the boy clinging to her hip. "Danny, you have to get up!" The voice was distorted. Suddenly quiet, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud and shrill. "Danny, please!" I felt the grip of her arms as she attempted to lift me, but I couldn't move. My head felt heavy, my arms felt non-existent, and consciousness was there, and then gone with every passing second. A few moments were lost from me, but what remained of my awareness was brought back by a scream. Evelyn was telling the boy to run. Her voice was a dry crackle, and in an instant the warmth of her hold was torn away as she was ripped from the ground upwards. I couldn't blink. Couldn't even move my head. I could only watch the towering man, his wooden face featureless but his posture predatory, as he held her in the air by her throat. I was incapable of making a sound as the creature's free hand rubbed her forehead, her hair, pulling it out of her face and inspecting the look of terror that she wore. The only thing I could do was watch in silence, struggling to breathe while her flails turned into desperate kicks for freedom. The creature traced lines on her face with a long, sharp claw. That moment was so agonizingly slow before one finger found the top of her eyelid and pushed it upwards, revealing a frantic, darting eye. Every single part of me wished
not
that I
bad.
couldn't see this, but more than that, I wished that
Cool.
I could do something. Even in the blur, there was no mistaking the choking scream that tore through her throat. The sound of sharp edges digging into soft skin, the color of blood dripping onto the grass and dirt below us. She cried a wail that hurt more than anything else to hear. Watched the monster drop her into a huddled mess on the ground. She moved and writhed in an attempt to get away, one hand covering her face, but in the darkness I could see blood seeping through her shaking fingers. She crawled on her knees and one elbow, one invisible eye open wide in shock while the brute-faced man held his own hand up to his chest, putting a mass of blood and flesh into his body cavity as if it were a pocket. The entire time, Evelyn never stopped whimpering and gasping for breath in sheer panic. I blinked. The creature was gone. I blinked again, and a dark shadow loomed over me, swaying and glaring down as if looking for signs of life. I watched it tilt its head upward, and from beneath its chin a single human eye was staring down at me. I only saw it for a split second, and then the smell of leather and the pain of impact against the side of my head sent everything into a cold, quiet darkness. Like being in a dream. Nothing was linear, nothing was altogether there. I no longer heard Evelyn's sobs, but I heard the distant voice of a man. Was it far away, or was I not entirely in my head anymore? My sparse hearing picked up the pop of gunshots, then the sound of a screech and frantic steps. Then all I registered was pain in my chest and neck as I was dragged immobile through the grass. I opened my eyes for only a second to see heavy black boots and a pair of denim jeans above me, and then the limp auburn strands of hair from a body hanging over a broad shoulder. The next time I closed my eyes, it must have been for a good long while. I didn't wake up until 2 days later. I heard the beeps of machines, smelled the sharp scent of disinfectant, heard distant muffled voices. It was a chore to open my eyes, and even when I did, there was nothing but a blur of white in my vision until I gained awareness to blink. Underneath me was a stiff but warm mattress. My fingers touched the smoothness of wires and cords. I was looking up at a hospital ceiling lying
that's better.
in a white bed. I glanced down at my body and saw the bandages peeking out from the neck of the blue paper smock I had been dressed in. Tightness around my head suggested my forehead had been wrapped as well. Before I had a chance to ask what day it was out in the open room, a quiet voice greeted me from my bedside. Can you hear me? Yeah. My tongue and throat were dry, which I would have expected once I realized I had been asleep for 2 days. I turned my head and I saw her sitting in the seat beside me, curled with her knees up and her head leaning on one arm of the chair. It was Evelyn, paper bracelet on her wrist, wearing a hospital gown 2 sizes too big, and looking at me with one tired eye and the other covered by a large white bandage.
Oh, hey, redesigned.
Evelyn, what day?
You're good.
Wednesday, she said.
I've been off for a few weeks,
Good to see
actually.
you, Danny.
This is like my third
And I could say the same.
or fourth stream back.
My final thoughts before being plunged into a near comatose state was the bitter realization that we
But you're all good.
all could have died. The idea crossed my mind for one dreary second that perhaps we were. Where's the little boy? I asked her, which she answered after taking a heavy breath and exhaling a sigh. It's okay. Her words washed over me with relief. It's okay. Finn found us, chased the thing away, and called the police, but the boy wasn't hurt. He's home with his family now. I was suddenly caught by the impulse to reach out my hand, and did it before even thinking it over. Evelyn looked at my open palm for a moment before resting her head on one hand and holding mine with the other. Our arms creating a chain between us. Can they fix it? I asked her. Your eye? It was a stupid question, but she didn't tell me that. She just shook her head and spoke in a hoarse croak, frown pulling at her lips. Took it? The whole thing?
Indeed, a werebear. Part of the level.
I looked for the right words, but there weren't any.
Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She had no witty jokes this time. No sassing, no crude humor. Evelynness was faded. As we looked at one another across the way with our heads both flat to the side, I was remembering this moment as it happened before. She was lying next to me on the floor of the radio station. My ears were stinging. Her voice was far away. It was my first day on the job when I saw her mouth the words, "Want to sleep on an actual mattress?" This time I was the one to say it. I watched her stone-cold expression change as a stiff lip grew into a quiver, and after a moment of silent hesitation, she nodded her head. Our hands slipped away from one another as she pushed herself out of the chair, where I saw for the first time how many bruises littered her shoulders and neck. I gritted my teeth with stiff discomfort in an attempt to move over a few inches, but it was enough for her. My co-worker, who once upon a time wouldn't even shake my hand, crawled into the bed beside me and laid her head on my shoulder without a single word. Her hand, spotted with freckles and fingernails bit down to the quick,
Really?
rested on my chest, where my pulse was steady and warm. This is Daniel Esperanza from 104.6 FM, and I'm lying here hoping that this is the last blood sacrifice that either of us will ever have to make.
Yeah, you wish. Part 2.
Hey there, kids. It's me, Mr. Creepypasta, voice of Daniel from Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station. And before I get started on tonight's
Pair
compilation, I just want to
tier,
let you know,
peer
Accounts
tier,
from a Lonely Broadcast Station is
pair
available
tear.
now on Amazon.
I don't get it.
Byron. Book 1 is the first in a long book series and expands greatly upon the audio that you're about to hear now. If you want to get your hands on the new book in paperback or on Kindle,
Oh, really?
you can
There's a
use the link
book.
in the description down below, or you can actually check your local Barnes & Noble. And now, on to tonight's story.
That's the I'm not supposed to get it.
I spent a good 2 days in the hospital, just learning how to navigate around the
That's
world
weird.
with only one eye. In case you weren't aware, getting used to lowered perception of depth is absolute, unadulterated bullshit. Yeah, this is Evelyn, and I'll be honest with you. For a bit of time there, I actually considered giving up trying to tell my story. Then I remembered that Daniel could have quit the day he lost his hearing, and he still showed up to work a day earlier than expected. Call me stubborn, but I'm not gonna let that nerd show me up, since I'm pretty sure I'd never hear the end of it. So here I am, back at the radio station and with more of a tale to tell.
Really?
I may have lost an actual part of my body, but I'd argue that Daniel got the worst of it. He was unconscious for 2 entire days after the ordeal in the woods, and when I was well enough to get out of my own room and visit him, they told me that he was lucky that his spine hadn't been cracked. He had fractured ribs, a ton of bruising, a pretty serious concussion, and he definitely needed stitches on the side of his head. As for me, the lost eye was the worst of it, and the rest of the bruises around my neck just made it look like I was into some serious kinky shit. You know, nothing major. Morning we were both free to go. We took a quiet, awkward taxi cab back to the radio tower. The drive was long and dreadful, seeing the mountains and trees come into view especially. Being in the hospital sucked, sure, but something about being in a different town around different people was almost like a vacation once we got over the horror and injury aspects of it all. When we arrived, we found Finn at the controls, looking tired but not necessarily unhappy to see us. Apparently, the ordeal and the night of the wedding had been punishment
Freaking
enough for how much
huge.
responsibility we dumped on him. "You both look like garbage," he said, straight to the point, honest and brutal. I appreciated it. I watched him scrunch his brows together, looking at me before pointing to his own eye. When can you, get the bandage off? No idea, I shrugged, then used one finger and a hollow cheek to make a noise out of the corner of my mouth, scooped it out like a melon ball. Finn visibly cringed at that as he turned back to his desk. I heard a quiet murmur of, "Sweet Jesus," under his breath, and I'll admit, I was a little proud to get a reaction like that. I was sick and tired of crying and moping about it. If I couldn't make a joke at my own expense, who was I anymore? Anything happen while we were gone? I asked. Finn sat back down, though I half expected him to be in his car and halfway down the driveway as soon as we arrived. A few things, he said casually. I got a nice complaint from the police chief for still carrying a gun to work, even though it saved your asses, so that's confiscated now. That ugly bird won't fucking leave. There was some earthquake on Tuesday, caused a weird sinkhole out by the tree line that took down a security camera. I put it back up somewhere else, though. We got some phone calls. Local news wanted to interview both about Bernard. Police intercepted the plans and said no to that idea, though, and left it as a write-up in the paper about a bear attack, or, who the hell is Bernard? I interrupted. Fenn raised his brows, peering over one shoulder. The 3-year-old you chased into the woods. I shook my head, slumping down into the second chair while Dan busied himself starting a pot of coffee. I feel bad for that little guy. Why? Fenn asked. He hardly had a scratch on him. You did good, kiddo. No, because his name is Bernard. Have you ever met a Bernard that wasn't like 55 and balding, or like who had fought in the goddamn Civil War? Like, let's ask this toddler if he remembers the Industrial Revolution, and don't call me kiddo. Finn pushed himself out of his seat with a chuckle, leaving me alone at the controls. Good to have you back, kiddo. I scanned the screens in front of me. The security cameras were up and running with nothing weird to see. All of the tabs on the screen were minimized in a perfect grid, and Finn had even mathematically timed a list of songs to fit each 30-minute block down to the goddamn second. This guy was better at my job than I was. You going home already? I saw him walk away, but instead of grabbing his things and heading out the door, he was just strolling towards the kitchen. No, ma'am, he told me. I'm getting overtime to relax and drink coffee while you do all the work this afternoon. Daniel appeared in the doorway then, 2 generic white cups in his hands. He passed one over to Finn with a grimace of apology. The water's rusty. I put extra creamer in it, though. He handed me the second cup, and I looked at the oddly orange-tinted liquid with some hesitation before realizing that I had probably drank worse tasting and more harmful things. I gave it a sniff, and something about it made my stomach churn. It, smells like iron? I said, taking the smallest possible sip. Oh, it tastes like how biting your tongue feels. Ugh. Finn was avoiding ingesting even a drop from the cup at all costs, giving it a scrutinizing look instead. Sure, rusted pipes weren't pleasant, but I'd been here long enough not to be picky about that sort of thing. He apparently didn't agree. I should, check the plumbing, probably. Daniel took Finn's chair when the latter of the two disappeared through the kitchen door. We were back to where we used to be. Just the two of us, sitting in front of these headache-inducing screens, headsets sitting next to us and waiting to be used. The last few days had dragged on for so long that it felt surreal to be back, almost like we'd been away for a few months. I didn't like this sense of newness that it brought, like sitting down behind the desk for the first time all over again. We've got time to waste, Daniel said, setting his coffee cup to the side of his keyboard. It always made me nervous how closely he placed it to our delicate technology. There's quite a lot of those cassette tapes to get through. Do you need a break from the creepy shit, or do you want to, have me put one in? My gaze left my coworker's face and wandered to the corner of the room, underneath one edge of the lookout window. The cassette player was sitting there neatly, the tapes stacked around it. We're never gonna get a break from the creepy shit, I told him, marching over to the pile of tapes and searching for the next one on the list. This recording was a relatively short one, but I still think it merits transcribing. Here's everything Eric, or number 7, had to say.
It's December 5th, 2012. I've been told time and time again that we'll find the number 8 soon so I can get some time out of this broadcast tower. It hasn't happened. Starting to think that I'll be waiting much longer than they make it sound. One of the officers from the police station stopped by today, giving some information on number 6. The executive decision we made was to never tell his family how he died. Instead, they told his wife and 2 sons that it was an animal attack. It's not entirely untrue, I suppose. And the condition of his body would make a swift cremation preferable. Thankfully, they agreed. No one ever had to see him or the parts they didn't recover, except those of us here. The conversation was interesting for other reasons, however. The officer, whose name escapes me, but started with an F, if I recall correctly, was curious about my time working in wildlife conservation. In turn, he told me an interesting fact about this location and what it was used for. At first glance, I could tell that it was supposed to be a fire watch or a ranger's outpost of some sort, as the building is much older than the radio mast that reaches above it. He's told me that it's been an outpost in this exact location for almost a century. Before the radio was built, this entire area was blocked off. About 2 decades ago, fences were placed all around the town to discourage people from going into the woods, though a few kids probably still tried. The watchtower itself was occupied by local law enforcement, but when the fences didn't keep people from snooping, they had to disguise the tower as something more simplistic, something they would trust. They'd never question what was happening up there. Radio station. According to the officer I spoke to, the first known solution to our unique problem was a tower that was built here before this building ever existed. Members of the town council would take turns watching in the towers and ring a bell to chase off anything that came out of the woods, seeing as they hated the sharp sound that it made. Sounds like a rotten solution to me, considering how they would have to ring it constantly to avoid anything coming through undetected. I'm glad our technology is more sophisticated today than it was back then. Still, an interesting fact. It's another fog day. I'm prepared this time, thankfully, and I don't intend on ending up like my former coworker. The only thing distracting me is this bird sitting near the window, and it's the same bird from yesterday, sitting in almost the exact same spot. Something about its dark, beady eyes makes me feel uncomfortable. Maybe by tomorrow it'll be gone.
Of all the recordings, this was probably the least traumatic of them all, but somehow the most useful. When it was over and the tape was left with nothing but empty space, I ejected it from the machine and set it aside, both elbows on the table, and a crinkle in my brow. "It makes sense," I remarked, eyes scanning the wall until they fell upon the red emergency button. "I guess that's why we still call it the bell?" At this point, I was just about to put my headset on and get ready for a news broadcast when a pair of heavy footsteps began stomping towards us from the kitchen. I recognized Finn's various walks. Sometimes he marched around like a herd of buffalo. Sometimes he was quieter than a shadow on the floor. This time, his feet raced quickly towards us with more urgency than anger. He grabbed both of our coffee cups, his own expression looking sick. I lifted one ear off my headset to hear him babbling on his way to the kitchen. "Water's not rusty. You don't want this." I took off my headphones fully. "What?" "I said you don't want this." I could hear him pouring the coffee down the sink. Both cups at once. Now I know I should have just assumed that our sink is always going to be fucking weird and left it at that, but curiosity tore me away from the comfort of my rolling chair and into the kitchen doorway, where the sight of the mess made my gut churn. The sink was bubbling again. Large bubbles of thick, red liquid popped and left splatters on the edges of the basin. Finn's hands were covered in it, leaving fingerprints on the coffee cups he had stolen away from us. He turned to me, a scowl of disgust on his face, and showed me the red stains on his fingers. "Smell the water," he demanded. "No?" "Smell it." "Okay, let me clarify this. Fuck no." Before Finn could further pressure me to inspect the scent of the dirty red sink, a large bubble popped and sprayed droplets across the side of his face, causing him to squint one eye and grimace as a shiver went down his spine. "Oh, it's not water," he told me, wiping his face. "It's blood, and it's warm. Have you ever seen your sink do this before?" I didn't answer him right away. too busy wishing somehow I could wipe the taste off my tongue. Oh my god, I drank that. I actually put that in my mouth, my own actual human mouth. Oh, I was busy trying not to gag, and all that Finn could ask was if this had happened before. Oh, strangely, the answer was yes. The fact made me want to rip the sink right out of the kitchen and chuck it into the woods. Yeah, it has. Once on the night I called you, while Elijah was here for the first time. Months earlier, when I spent my first few weeks here in the tower, I wondered how on earth a voice got into the pipes. Jennifer's voice, specifically. What I still assumed was some creepy parlor trick meant to scare us brought a new level of disgust to light when I thought about where the water in our taps came from. The ground beneath us. The soil we shared with the forest was as rotten as the roots that had squeezed the life out of my friend. Yeah, we're drinking bottled water from now on, I announced, my voice a quiet rattle in my discomfort. The cheap shit. I don't care. Was it ever a wonder why this place was making everyone sick? I never slept. I hardly wanted to eat, and now the forest had taken a piece of me for its own. I was positive that I wasn't the first person to feel like trash just from spending too much time here, and now there was blood coming up from the ground and into the water supply. God, this place was fucking unlivable. I was sick of this kitchen, turning my back just to get away from it. There wasn't any time to sit down, however, as a sound surprised both Finn and I. It was a knock on the door. Through the small glass window, just big enough to peek a face through, I could see someone on the other side, anxiously awaiting to be invited in. Elijah was back. Just when I thought we'd never see him again. Oh, shit. It's him again, I whispered hoarsely to Finn, who was inspecting a partially bruised tangerine from the kitchen. He put it down on the counter to peer around and catch a glimpse of our visitor from behind the glass. Finn, stick around in case he tries any shit. Dan, don't get punched in the nose again. I watched Eliza lift his fist to knock on the door again, but I had grabbed the handle and forced it open before he could. Before I could even get a word out to say hello or what the hell do you want, he was inside the station and pacing back and forth with his hands dug deep into his pockets of his sweater. It was July. He didn't need a sweater. I had to come back. I can't stop thinking about it. He was speaking fast. One hand removed to gesticulate wildly as he spoke. He circled around the room, passing me and then passing the window. When he rounded the end of the table where Daniel sat, my coworker actively moved a few inches to keep out of his way. I can't fall asleep anymore. When I do, I see her every single time. As soon as I start to dream, I leave all the lights on, the television, the radio, anything to keep me awake. He stopped walking, having ended up next to the kitchen doorway. He leaned against the wall with his forehead pressed against it, one arm limp at his side. It doesn't work. I look out my window and I see the woods, the trees. Every photo of her doesn't look like her anymore. It fucking looks like... He was unwilling to say it, but I knew. After seeing her dead, it was hard to imagine her alive anymore. God damn it, I can't even turn on the radio without remembering it. I hear this broadcast, I hear you, and that sound makes my fucking brain itch. Elijah. Finn spoke sternly with a hand clapped down on the other man's shoulder. You need to relax. You need to talk to someone about this. Elijah laughed. He laughed and he shook his head as he pulled away from Finn's grasp, resuming his quick stomp to the front room and out of reach. I am! He shouted, and when he would shout it a second time, he threw both hands up in the air. Inside his pockets, he had been carrying a semi-automatic pistol, which he waved up above his head. I am! I'm talking to you! He pointed at Finn. And you! And you! The gun-faced Daniel and I both one at a time before centering back on the former police officer who had changed his mind immediately about stepping forward to grab him. The three of us were frozen in place as Elijah's eyes darted, waiting to see who would move first. I wasn't fucking going to. I wasn't stupid enough to get closer knowing that I couldn't defend myself against a gun. However, I also never knew when to keep my mouth shut. You're acting like a fucking idiot. Now would you please put that down? A tone of voice that I thought was demanding only earned a laugh from him. I'm the fucking idiot, huh? It was chilling, the way he managed to laugh, grimace, and now shed tears all at the same time. His tired eyes were wet, and his hands shook where the gun was pointed my way. I'm the idiot. I'm the idiot because I'm the only one looking for justice. How much did you hate her, Lynn? Enough to let her die and then sit up here like it never happened? We don't even have a body to bury anymore, and you're up here talking about the weather. Just fucking peachy. As soon as his finger began to twitch near the trigger, I could see Finn begin to move. He was sidestepping across the room from one end to the other, both of his hands up, but even as he inched closer, Elijah didn't take the gun off of me. I didn't hate her. As my voice trembled, I became aware of Daniel's hand now tightly gripping my own. How could you think I wanted her to die? How? Elijah, I miss her so goddamn much you don't even realize. I want her back too. His trembling finger began to steady. The shake of the gun no longer rattled as loudly as it did before. His lips pursed in a thin frown. He was glaring, unblinkingly, taking heavy breaths through his nose. Then act like it. After he said those words, I expected the next loud noise to be the shot from the gun, but instead an ear-piercing alarm cut into the open air. Shrieking in the cramped space, I covered my ears. Daniel fidgeted with his hearing aid, and Elijah's concentration broke long enough for him to drop the gun and put both palms on the sides of his head. Finn had been circling around the room with a purpose. He had pushed open the fire escape door, which sounded the blaring alarm now tormenting all of our ears. As the siren continued, I watched Daniel as he released my hand and raced across the room, kicking the handgun across the floor to sit at Finn's feet. He stooped to pick it up, releasing the magazine and now shoving the unloaded gun into his belt loop. With the same hand, he pulled out a ring of keys, using one of them to disable the alarm box next to the door. I was instantly pissed that Finn had a copy of those keys that, someone somehow never seemed to ever give me one. Get out, the former officer said, gesturing towards the fire escape. You're going to sit on the stair, both hands on the railing, and I'm going to watch you until the police get here. If you so much as move 2 feet, I'll have this thing loaded and aimed before you reach the first landing. Now, go. Without his weapon, Elijah's confidence seemed to drain. It was like watching dirt wash away under a water tap. There one moment and gone the very next. He had no words to speak, only a tremble in his breath as he followed Finn's orders and left the room, his anger turning into what looked like shame, embarrassment, and maybe disappointment. Wait. Daniel stopped Finn from closing the door behind Elijah, slipping through the crack just as it was about to latch. When he was outside in the sun, easing himself down next to the same man who had just pointed a gun at him, Finn and I both exchanged looks. Your part-timer's a dumbass, he said to me, and I agreed. With the fear of danger in the room somewhat dissipated, I joined the party huddled around the fire escape, sliding through the doorway and leaning there against the outside wall. Finn had propped the door open with one of our chairs, making some distance while he used the phone. Elijah wrapped his hands tightly around the railing. His eyes were squinting as he looked down across the treetops, blinded by the sunlight. I'm sorry. His voice was hoarse as he spoke to Dan. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just hate this place and everything it's done. I hate that I can't stop thinking about it. Daniel didn't attempt to touch him or even sit close, but there was compassion somewhere in the way he looked at him.
Why?
We both understood, I think. The part with the gun was a little over the top, sure, but I think at one point or another we both wish we could just leave and never think about the radio station again. What's keeping you here? Dan asked. I saw Elijah shrug his shoulders after a moment of thought. I don't know. It's where we live together. It's where we've been all this time. Daniel shook his head. No, that's a shit
That doesn't
reason.
make any
If you
sense.
hate it and the memories just hurt now, there's no good reason to stay. You can take the good memories with you, No one ever said you had to just leave those behind. Elijah rested his chin on the railing, eyes focused up at the clouds. When he didn't answer, Dan spoke again. You need to get out of town, Elijah. You don't have to come back. Sometimes I think living in a small town makes it seem impossible to leave. You forget
And now the
that
fork's
there's more outside of the
gone.
village limits, and that these long, endless roads surrounded by woods or cornfields or abandoned barns actually go somewhere. We were sitting in a world of complete isolation, but it wasn't forever. It only reached so far. Elijah wiped his face, a few stray patches of tears having collected on the surface of his skin. One hand reached into his pocket, but he pulled it out quickly. A box of handgun bullets slapped down on the floor of the fire
Doesn't make
escape.
sense.
Keep it, he said, sliding the box towards Dan. Keep the gun. I don't need it, and I don't want it. But you might. Daniel's silent thank you came in the form of a nod as he picked up the box, setting it in his lap. Moments later, Finn was at the doorway again, moving the chair out of the way and gesturing towards Elijah to stand up. I made the call, he said. I expected him to follow it up with a warning for Elijah's arrest, and I think the others did too. I told them the alarm
Why
went
does
off
it
by
keep
accident.
falling through the
No one's
table?
coming out. But you have to leave, Elijah, and you cannot come back. Can you promise me that? Elijah stood, his hands dropping from the railing and releasing the white-knuckle grip. Yeah, he said with a nod, glancing towards Daniel and then towards me. I don't think I'll have a problem with that. The gun and bullets were stored safely on one of the desks between where Dan and I sat. Elijah left, getting in his car and disappearing down the gravel road. I stood outside to revel in the fresh air for just a few minutes and realized something that felt strange to me. This was probably the last time I'd ever see Elijah again. I hope so, really.
And
I
that
hope
one
he
fell.
listens. I hope he finds something better. But I wish that he could have taken us with him. This is Evelyn at 104.6 FM, and
Doesn't
the gun
make
in the
sense.
desk
It's a
is giving me
table.
an idea.
It's honestly kind of annoying.
I'm getting my eye back.
Doesn't make sense. It's a table. It's supposed to hold it.
We watched the sun go down through the broadcast room window. The sky painted with strokes of red and yellow that melted into deep purple. It would have been a picture
It
of
is
serenity
literally
if
a
it didn't
fork and a
remind me of
table.
wildfire rising up
And
from
for
the
some
trees.
reason, it's just
Maybe that would have
not.
been preferable to
The table's
what it
just
really
not
was.
taking it.
A long, dreadful night on its way. Even inside, the humidity filled the air with a tense electricity that put my nerves on edge. We were leaving for the woods.
It
getting our
even
things
fell
packed,
through
a
the
compass,
fucking
flashlights,
floor.
batteries, the handgun, and all the ammo we had. As we did, we decided to tune our ears into one more of those cassette tapes. We bypassed the audio journals in the middle, including the second to last that we still hadn't found, and went straight for the final recording. It wasn't what we expected.
It's February 10th, 2013.
This voice was different. It was a lady's voice.
This is number 8 from the emergency broadcast station. I've been here alone for 4 days since we lost number 7. We reached a record-breaking 3 months of
Okay,
service
where the hell
before
is
his
it?
death. I regretted that I only knew him for a short
It's gonna
while,
go through the
and
table.
even more I regret having to be there when he was killed. I had been warned. They told me that the creatures in the woods like to take parts from their victims, but I couldn't believe how savagely they ripped him to shreds. The only thing left was his head in the end, but even then, the eyes were gone. Both of them, taken clean from the skull. I almost thought I saw a glimpse of them this afternoon, but it was just this strange-looking bird that's been hanging around in the broadcast room window, right where the tree line ends. I can't see him now, but I feel watched. I'm so sorry, number 7.
The recording sent a chill up my spine, or maybe several. Daniel was skeptical at first when I told him that I wanted to go into the woods and get rid of that fuck that stole my eye right out of the socket. But I think that seeing my reaction to the recording was enough to sway him more towards my side. I just don't like it, I told him as I clipped one of the glorified fanny packs we found in the closet around my waist. I put it to the side so that I didn't look like a tourist. I don't like the thought of my body being out there or even just a part of it. Daniel shook the box of ammo that Elijah had given him, making sure it was enough to get us by. He scoffed, his laughter laced with a hoarse snort. So is this one of those cases of if I can't have it, nobody can? I looked back at him, lips pursed in a frown. Yes, I said it bluntly, and I was serious about it. You don't need to go if you don't want to. I mean, after the last time, I'd understand. Dan didn't say a word at first, but he looked straight at me as he laced the strap of his bag around one shoulder, securing it tightly and zipping it shut. With one last peek at the monitors to make sure the music was set to play until morning, he gave me a singular, decisive nod of the head. Ready, he stated. Ready to go shoot a tree in the face, I suppose. If everything failed, he'd be ready to die, I thought. I didn't dare speak it out loud since those words wouldn't have been useful. He already knew. Our steps down the metal stairwell had never echoed the same way than they did then. The sound was sharp, oddly uniform, like the hit of sticks against the drum in a funeral march. When the heavy door at the bottom pushed open and the summer air came washing over, it was humid and thick. I heard the crickets and frogs, the sound of my own boots kicking up the dirt and grass beneath me. If I focused hard enough, maybe I could have imagined that I was still at my mom's house or drinking a beer while sitting outside my own college dorm. As the last few rays of sun disappeared and the sky became the darkest it would be, the crickets and frogs went quiet. In an unnatural change of pace, they were buzzing one moment and then silent the very next, as if the night fell so thick around us that it choked the sound out of every living thing. Do you want to carry the gun? Daniel asked, pointing down at his bag. A generous offer, but maybe not the most thought-out one? I don't think my aim is what it used to be, Danny boy. I'll trust you with it, okay? Our first steps into the woods were dizzying. There was an energy out here, and I don't mean that as in some vague ghostly bullshit. It felt teeming with too much life, even when there was none to be seen. When the branches above our heads cracked and moved, the groans of the old wood sounded like a voice. When small animals ran through the overgrowth or scaled the sides of the trees, I felt as if they were watching and whispering to one another. Even the mosquitoes, which were eating the hell out of Dan's neck right now from the start, they were active and agitated. This place was crowded and unhealthy. I stopped for a moment to listen, and Daniel did me the courtesy of standing still as well. There was a very distant sound, like a low bellow. It was far away, but the vocal moan was tired and unhappy. I thought of some old dragon being awoken from its slumber, and all at once hoped to God it wasn't as real or as big as it sounded. I hope the root man doesn't only show himself when there are kids around, I said to my companion, who was squinting his eyes to see my lips move. Daniel shrugged. He seemed content enough with you and your eye. I answered his sass with a sneer and scrunched eyebrows. The one above my right eye socket still hurt to move, but it was worth that pain. This time, if he wants to take a chunk, he can take one from you. I immediately felt like trash after I said it. Sorry, I'm in a shit mood for jokes. From the corner of my vision, I saw Dan's hand reaching out, and I suspected he was going to pat my arm. He never finished the word. From out of complete silence, I heard the crunch of leaves, and both of us witnessed a dark, almost shapeless form pass not 5 feet from where we stood. It darted from behind one tree and then disappeared from around another, crossing directly in front of our path. Daniel's hand finally did find my arm, but instead of the gentle pat I'd expected, he gripped it tightly, almost painfully. My heart skipped a beat, and the air in my lungs was pushed out in a loud, sudden exhale. It was hard to catch another breath. I almost didn't want to breathe, as the air around us was filled with a rotten, molded stench. It reminded me of rusted metal, mildew, and decay all set out to soak in the heat. Oh, I could hear him. The creak of old wood and the rattle of mummified flesh and bone. Gun. I mouthed the word to Daniel, nodding my head down at the satchel around his shoulder. Take out the gun. He fumbled for it. I wanted so badly to be annoyed to just tear it out of the bag on my own, but even in the dark, I could see his hand shaking. I could see that shadow lurking nearby, circling around. It wasn't a curious gesture, like an animal just trying to get a better look at something that it couldn't quite discern as predator or prey. He moved rapidly in randomly chosen directions, and I felt tension in my chest knowing that if I stopped turning to watch him, he could bound towards us easily. And so quickly. Fuck! Daniel almost dropped the gun while he attempted to load it, distracted by the movement between the trees. Come on, come on! I heard the click of the magazine being pushed into place. Daniel readied his stance, but the weapon still trembled and rattled in his hands. His head turned one way and the next, always looking for a single moment when the creature stopped, but the shadow never sat still for more than an instant. In the dull light from the moon, I could see the whites of Daniel's eyes as they continued to dart in every direction, worry drawn on his face with a heavy brow. I thought the same thing. I thought when he came back after his very first traumatizing day, he didn't need to be here. But he chose to. God damn it, Dan. A gunshot pierced through the air way too close to my head for comfort. I covered the ear that got the worst of the sound, but any words that I could have exclaimed would have just been drowned out by the bellow that sounded out and shook the ground under our feet. It came from the mountains, but even the distance made the insides of my ears pound. Birds abandoned their perches at the trees. The buzzing flies grew silent, and the root-faced man had retreated to the shadows during the silence that followed. I watched Daniel flinch, a hand twitching as it raised half the distance to his ear by pure instinct. All this time, I wondered about the final sound he had ever heard with perfect ears. I considered that moment to be my answer. What the fuck was that? I turned to squint my remaining eye towards the top of the trees, horrified by the very distant movement that I saw. Suddenly, I regretted not having a weapon of my own. What the fuck was that? I don't care, we're leaving. Daniel sounded urgent, the gun still held in one hand while the other flailed outward and grabbed the sleeve of my t-shirt. He tugged me toward him, and in that moment we were both utterly content to leave and just give up this entire mission. Did I still hate the thought of that creature having my eye? You're damn right I did. But I had the distinct feeling that if we waited any longer, the forest would end up taking more than what we would be left with. We made a mistake then in thinking that the bellows and the earth-shattering weight would just chase away the creature we came to find, but we turned and began rushing towards the same path that we took to get there, but the cracks of twigs and the rustle of leaves followed after us. A shadow darted to my left and then disappeared when it crossed in front of us, leaving Daniel and I both to stop in our tracks. That son of a bitch was trailing us, even when the distant rumble of giant steps became not so distant anymore. Just as soon as he was there, he was gone. The woodland stretching out before us, thick with vegetation and spots of shadow, was empty. But then, I heard the crack of slow footsteps behind us, this time with a purpose. The root-faced man released a rattle of breath, like a gasp taken from dried, mummified lungs. He had no mouth, but I could see the dust and dried leaves leaving an empty cavity between his exposed rib bones. He had grown since we last saw him. The worn and ratty clothes he once wore were gone, but where he would have had a naked human body, the forest had replaced the flesh with vines, thorns, and what appeared to be very pale, thin, small hands coming out of his body and curling around the bone and the bark. Oh my god. The hands still moved. They still clawed as if trying to escape. They were half the size of mine. We moved before he did. Daniel still gripped the handle of the gun tightly, but while facing both immediate and eventual dangers, I preferred the fact that he wasn't trying to shoot it in every direction. I don't think I've ever been able to run so quickly or for so long, not until I knew the feeling of adrenaline taking over every move I made, and yet no matter how far we thought we ran, it never seemed far enough. We still heard those pounding feet behind us. We still saw a shadow darting from one side to the other, and somewhere up the mountain, we couldn't outrun that angry bellow. We didn't know which way we were running. In the dark, every tree looked exactly the same as the one next to it, but one thing was unfamiliar. My eye caught the straight edge of a wooden sign, the words so old and chipped from the surface that I couldn't have read what it said even if I had time to stop and look. A singular sign wasn't all there was. Twice I almost tripped over bits of wood and stone on the ground, and then the second time, the toe of my shoe caught something distinctly metallic. It was a track, smaller than a railway for a train and moving downward? Shit! I skidded to a stop, grabbing the back of Daniel's shirt before he had a chance to stumble into the dark and lose his footing. We were standing at the top of a steep downward drop, which had probably been a smooth hill until the ground began to cave in and reclaim it. Wooden stakes in the ground held up the partially collapsed entrance to an underground mine, but the track leading into it was being swallowed by what was at least several decades worth of moving earth and mudslides. As I moved a race around it, I felt the earth shift under my feet. The ground didn't feel safe. It didn't feel sturdy, and those few seconds of hesitation was all it took. The rattle of bone and bark sent a chill through my body, but nothing froze my blood the way a glimmer of a single eye in the darkness did, darting, searching, finally focusing itself on me. My own eye sat nestled in the center of the creature's throat and stared unblinkingly forward as he took staggering, noisy steps through the dirt. Those tiny fingers in his chest were reaching, clawing, either trying to get out or trying to pull something in. When he moved closer, I moved back, and I could even see Daniel hesitating as the earth underneath began to shift again. It took him a moment, but I heard the metal click of the gun he had been waiting all this time to use. He pointed it, hands shaking. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear something else as well, the crack of branches in a large oak tree, the huff of breath through a dust-filled snout. A single gunshot rang out, and I could see the scatter of wooden splinters in the air, but the screech that followed may not have been Daniel's doing at all. In a split second, a shadow bigger than anything I could have expected fell down from the trees, taking branches with it and snapping a thin birch in half as it landed. The amalgamate had changed. It always did. A flurry of arms and claws, some of them at its side and others reaching out from its stomach, grasped together to wrap around the smaller beast. The giant stood, 4 of its hooves still on the ground, but 2 of them in the air, where its ribs would have once been underneath the fur. The bones had now sharpened into a gaping mouth, one that rippled and dripped in a blood-filled cavity. Antlers cracked against the tree limbs as it rose to its full height, lifting the root-faced man and holding his body immobile. God, the way it screamed. A dry wheeze escaped its open chest, but I swear that somewhere muffled in that twisted body of plant and human, I could hear small, pathetic, fearful whimpers. Like a twig snapped in half, the giant tore his prey into 2 pieces, cracking the bone and bark with ease. It threw the bottom half aside, leaving the forest floor to reclaim it, while I watched in disgust as the cavity in its chest opened to welcome the rest. It ate him alive.
Oh my god,
swallowing
come
his body
on.
piece by piece until the arms, hands, roots, and that one singular eye were all absorbed, only to find new homes. 2 of the small
Finally.
arms broke through the skin near the beast's shoulders. Another clawed its way out of its chest. I became aware in that moment of just how many pieces had been taken. Bones, hooves, claws, teeth. I could see so many human parts just in one glance. I wasn't gonna count them. I didn't want to. The creature blinked, 6 eyes glimmering through the dark all at once until a 7th opened blearily in its forehead for the first time. If this thing had it, I was never getting it back. Oh, fuck this. Daniel pointed the gun just as the amalgamate fell back on its 6 legs and began slowly approaching us with the confidence of something that knew we couldn't outrun it. This time, Dan didn't hesitate. I heard one gunshot, then two, both of them aimed at the beast's head. The first shot grazed an antler, which agitated but didn't seem to injure it. But the second one, the bellow the beast made was ear-splitting. I felt as if my brain were melting inside of my skull, and both hands covered my ears to keep it from dripping out. Daniel had hit the mark the second time, a stream of dark blood falling onto the grass beneath the monster's front hooves. How Dan managed to hit a target in the center of that thing's head, I'll have no fucking clue as long as I live. The beast stomped, flailing its head in anger, blood pouring from the eye socket. It was a small injury in comparison to the thing's massive size, but goddamn if that didn't piss it off. Each step I took backwards, I felt the earth shake a bit more. The stomping hooves, the weight. He was gonna cave us all in. It's okay. Dan gripped my wrist with a white-knuckle hold and took a large step back. The dirt shifted again, this time crumbling down into the dark pits of the mine. I looked behind myself and couldn't even see the floor. Just take one more step back. 1, 2, on 3. Daniel didn't get to 3. The amalgamate flailed its antlers one last time and then began to charge towards us, but those first 2 steps were enough to crack through the ground and send the earth crumbling beneath our feet. The cold shock of falling backwards, never knowing how far you're going to fall or what you'll be falling onto, was a lot like falling into water. Cold, overflowing bath water. I remembered something then. That split second before my head hit the ground, I could see the tile on the bathroom ceiling where I used to live. It was ugly, made up of all these random scratches and shapes. I stared at one for the longest time because it looked a little bit like a man's face. A man's face with a big beard. Oh, when Jennifer slapped me awake, choking on cold bathwater, her stark white face covered the view of the ceiling. After that day, I couldn't see that face in the tile anymore. It's no matter, really, how long I stared. Except there was no water this time. But the stone poking into my back was painful and cold all the same. I opened my eye to the dim, jagged opening above my head, a silhouette blocking the moonlight. It wasn't Jennifer. Daniel was panting, out of breath, and the dust was still clearing around us. I was only out of my mind for a few seconds. "Shit, are you okay?" he asked, slipping a hand behind my shoulders to help me sit up straight. Oh God, my back hurts like hell, but... Oh yeah, I'm fine. I squinted my
let's try this
eye
one
up
more
above
time.
us, the dust and dirt clouding my vision and stinging something awful. I half expected to see that beast had fallen in with us, but it was out of sight. Somewhere above us, but growing further away. I could hear the heavy steps of its hooves along the forest path. "I didn't kill it," Daniel said, sitting down on the ground. In the pale sliver of moonlight we were offered, I could see his dirt-covered face, tan skin turned red with scratches and glistening with sweat down here in the hot, humid cavern. He wore a scowl. "Sorry I shot your eye." I wiped my face, smearing the dirt that was already on my cheeks. "It's fine, Danny boy. I didn't really have a use for it anyways." Painfully, I sat up on my knees and then forced my legs to stand. We should see how far this mine goes, I guess. You got a flashlight?" He was pulling his out of his bag at the same time I was, but the light illuminated only more unpleasant sights. I expected stone and coal down here, but at first glance, all I saw were roots. The roots of the trees above had taken over, fighting their way through the dirt. An old minecart was tipped on its side, cocooned in the roots of a tree that had overgrown it, as if trapping it against the dirt. We walked quietly, tiredly, and with purpose. Any desire I had to investigate was gone, but a shuffle of sound from my right made my heart skip a beat. My hand almost instinctively turning the light to see. The roots covered every inch of the walls, but somewhere in there I could see the movement of something half-formed trying to break through. There wasn't just one. If I looked up close and for long enough, I'd probably see plenty of animals from the forest trapped in those roots, all of them in various states of decay and all of them still moving. Some of the remains, both skeletal and fleshy, were draped in bits of rotten old cloth. I felt another wave of discomfort as I recognized an old firefighter's coat, almost like the one I used to steal from my dad and wear around the house, only older, much older. What do you think caused them all to come back like that?
What the hell was
flashing his light
that?
on the opposite wall. I wished I had an answer for him. Honestly, I'm not sure anyone knows. Maybe nature's just different here and no one thing made it that way. Daniel took in a deep breath through his nose, but in the dim light I could see him wince.
Something
It
is
smelled
definitely wrong
awful
here.
down here. Oh, that was a terrible answer, he told me. I know. We followed the mine for about a mile, give or take. Maybe it just felt that long. We emerged.
Okay, well, good thing I found that.
The glow in the sky signaled the very early hours of the morning.
Okay, well, that opened. That's
But the
good.
fresh
That's
air
what
was
I
the most
wanted.
welcoming thing. I took in a deep breath and coughed, tasting dirt and ash in my lungs. I looked like shit. I probably smelled like shit, but seeing the tree line behind us would have been worth 10 times as much dirt caked into my body. We followed the tree line back towards the long gravel drive that Daniel took to work every day, and the same drive where I had been dropped off on my first day of work. Back then, I had no idea what all of this would become, and when I saw the tower again, I thought I'd feel a heavy pit of regret in my stomach. I didn't, strangely.
Okay.
It's weird how a place like that can almost feel like home when everything around it is 100 times more dangerous. Finn was waiting at the top when we got there, looking like a disappointed dad who had been waiting up for us all night. We got an earful, as I'm sure you can imagine, but in the end, I think he was just glad to see that we had come back from it all. Hell, he even congratulated Dan on getting a single shot in, telling us that they could hear the beast screaming all the way from the main road. You know, it seems like we didn't do much. I didn't get my eye back. We didn't kill that antlered fuck, whom I've decided, by the way, to call Big Boy from now on. But, like all things, I guess it was just a learning experience. Fen mentioned in passing that there's been...
Okay. So, I think I'm actually done for the day because I'm actually kind of tired. But we actually got a lot done. So we got this first section, and I may put some more Draugr and whatnot in here. Maybe. Actually, one thing that I kind of want to test. There is one thing I want to test. We're going to launch Skyrim one more time. But, like, having the first section, and like I said, I'm probably going to add some more Draugr, because I feel like it's not Draugr-y enough. But one thing I want to test is what kind of Draugr are spawning at a higher level. The Wolfman? What the hell? Not mine. Okay. Grolgan's. Oh, wow. Haha, this is from the old one. That's wild. Anyways. Actually crazy. But yeah, I want to test it out on like a higher level character. Or wait. What's up? This is a level 48 character. Okay. Yikes. Even as a level 48, that is kind of tough. Oh, that's funny. Am I encumbered? I guess that's why. Okay, no. What am I wearing? I'm not wearing a lot. Yeah, whatever. Wow, I actually died. Okay. Maybe a different character. I'm not really a fan of that one. $11.20. Okay, this kind of seems more like my character. Okay, yeah, this is... I remember this guy. All right. Now, we are only level 31, but... we do have, like, all our perks, whatnot, so... this might be better for us. Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe it is a little too easy, but we are, like, uber overpowered. But then again, I am kind of supposed to be overpowered. Like, if you're not prepared for this, by, like, having perks and whatnot, then you are kind of screwed. Okay. It's Golgan! I think he needs more health. Yeah. I think he needs more health. More defense or something. Alright, give me the wax-covered key. Okay. Let's see which Draugr come out to play. Now, I hope these Draugr are the right ones. I really, really do. Oh, for some reason they're already standing. Okay, this one's restless, which is a good thing. I'm not really impressed with the difficulty. Not to mention, what happened with these trigger boxes? What if Draugr boss would be a better one? That's just a Draugr. Are they fighting each other? Oh. I was hoping they'd be on the same side, but I guess I gotta put them in the same faction. Maybe I make a faction. I guess that makes sense. Okay. Well, we got some good information from that. Let me write it all down. At level 31 with OP gear. Golgan needs stat boosts. Too soft. Doesn't hit hard. Doesn't feel like a boss. Werewolves / werebears Need stat boost. Way too soft. Okay. Draugr fixes. Wrong. Draugr spawn. Need more Draugr. Oh, right. Faction Draugr with bears slash wolves. Oh yeah. Determine if Draugr activator is bugged. Because they were not supposed to be standing up when I got in there. So we will determine that. Okay, determine if Draugr activator is bugged. Yeah, this is a big one. That's the big one. Okay. That's all I got right now. So, at level 31 with OP gear, Golgan needs stat boosts. He died in like 3 to 4 swings. I know I'm level 31 with OP gear, but it doesn't feel very boss-like. Like, he felt a lot like the matron, which, I mean, the matron's, in my opinion, not supposed to be as powerful in this case. So he's way too soft, so he needs to be tankier, more defenses, more health. He doesn't hit hard like a boss, like a boss. So he needs higher attack. Werewolves slash werebears need stat boosts as well. They are way too soft. Way too soft. Like all the Draugr and whatnot die in one hit. The werewolves. That werewolf died in 2 swings. He's too soft. But the werebears need to be stronger than the werewolves, which I think it was. It just so I need to keep in mind that when I give both of them stat boosts, I need to kind of evenly stat boost them so that the werebear stays stronger than the werewolf. Okay, and now Draugr fixes. The wrong Draugr are spawning, which I mean, it's what the engine is saying is correct. It's just not what I want. So I need to like determine what the correct placement is for these Draugr. We need more Draugr because I feel like there just weren't enough. And I need to faction the Draugr with the werebears slash werewolves so that they don't attack each other. And when I walked in to the ruins of Mortrag, for some reason, the Draugr were already standing up. Which doesn't make sense. They're not supposed to be standing up. I guess they didn't attack right away. Is it because I disabled the markers? Or I... No. Wait. Stupid thing. Where am I? Oh, I'm upside down. I was about to say, what the hell is going on? Wait. Um, okay. Okay, creature alcove. That's how it's supposed to be. So that is linked with the alcove. And yeah, I mean, it was working before. I just wanted to make sure nothing like changed. Okay. Yeah, so everything is the way it should be. So I have all that. Okay. We're good. All right. So like I said, I am done for the day. I got some good information and we did a good chunk of cluttering. We have to, so this weekend, probably on Sunday, I'm going to clutter, I want to clutter the rest of the maze area. Finish setting up the levers because that's easy to do. And then next Monday, we'll like clutter this area and then put final touches on like every other area, like sounds, fog effects, stuff like that. Um, Everywhere because this isn't going to take long. At least I don't think. It could. I'm not sure yet. If it does, then we'll like do the finishing touches like on Wednesday. Take a look here. Wednesday the 19th. I'll be like finishing touches. Thursday. Ooh, you're cutting it close. But this is like the part that takes the longest. Okay, so like Thursday. Yeah, so Wednesday will be like finishing touches for cluttering. Thursday. I suppose Thursday. This will be done. The wolves and whatnot will be here. I suppose Thursday I will work on like scripting in the enemies for here. But the first thing I'm probably going to do is try to find a way to script in like the levers, how I want them to activate in a certain order. And then they're activated in that order, then this gate opens. That's what I want. Ultimately, that's what I want. Um That's probably next Thursday. And then the weekend of July 22nd, 23rd. Probably going to finish everything on that weekend, everything on this level. Like making sure that I have everything scripted correctly. All the enemies spawning where they should be, all that jazz. And then the 24th, the 26th, 27th, and then the weekend of the 29th and the 30th, we'll be working on the Sanctum level, which is like very short, like one room pretty much. And then hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have the entire level done. Like the whole thing. Maybe. That's kind of asking a lot. But because then August, I'll have a lot of time in August to kind of work in the quest, get the voice and the character and everything like that. All of that implemented. Balancing, bug finding, and fixing. As a matter of fact, I will probably spend a majority of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday playing through the level multiple times, balancing things and fixing bugs and whatnot. And then Thursday, as soon as we're done with the final touches of the 31st, we'll release it and then Starfield for a while. So yeah, that's it. That's the plan. That's the idea. I might have to write that down, but that's just kind of a general overview of what I want to do. So, yeah. I hope you all have a great day. Gonna have a pretty chillax Friday, and we got some fun things going on Saturday. But you should see me back live here on Sunday to finish up cluttering on the maze level. And then, yeah, you should see me back here on Sunday. So I hope you all have a great day, a great rest of your week. Be safe out there, and we'll see y'all